Position for landing.
MR 1422, Dingo, egret, unlocked. 20 to touchdown.
That's unusual.
What is?
Indications of Metatron. It's way too shallow.
The Metatron is not very deep.
And it's very strong. It wasn't here last time I came. What the hell is that? An orbital frame.
The original Zone of the Enders was probably one of the most highly anticipated games for the PlayStation 2 a few years ago, simply because Hideo Kojima had slapped his name on it. As such, people expected a certain level of quality. You know, they expected it to be of the caliber of a Metal Gear Solid game or something like that. Unfortunately, the end result was a game that was solid, but it sort of fell short of its promise. The gameplay mechanics were sort of slow. It had a host of other problems, some relating to the storyline and its main character. Zone of the Enders 2, the second runner, not only improves upon the storyline and you know, just the visual aspects of the game, it also improves on just about every other thing you can think of. Part of the problems with the original Zone of the Enders was just that its story wasn't all that appealing, especially its main character helped contribute to that just because he was constantly whining about having to engage in this interstellar war. Leo Stenbuck, the character from the original game, has been replaced with Dingo Egret, who's this expert pilot who has sort of exiled himself into this mining colony that goes to Jupiter's moons and kind of mines for Metatron. Unfortunately, when Dingo is out mining one day, Bahram, which is sort of the enemy force in this game, comes and starts attacking the mining facility. Dingo tries to get away and he accidentally stumbles upon Jehuti, which is the original orbital frame from the Zone of the Enders. Naturally, Dingo falls into Jehuti's cockpit and he takes control of it and starts fighting against the Bahram forces, and that's how sort of the storyline gets kicked off. The storyline in Zone of the Enders 2 is probably a little bit more prevalent than in any other sort of game of this type, and obviously that's partly due to Hideo Kojima's influence of having a really prevalent storyline. Unfortunately for this game, while the story itself is sound, it's kind of just this, you know, I'm going to get back at you for doing this to my friends sort of storyline. The dialogue itself isn't all that great. It's actually quite bad. It just sounds like the characters are talking to each other with non sequiturs, and at times you just have to kind of sit there and laugh because it makes sense, but at the same time it's just not smooth at all. There's like no transition between the dialogue.
So you want this frame, don't you?
Maybe.
Even if you're Bahram, that's too rough.
It sure is.
It's also worth noting that in the storyline, Leo Stenbuck from the original game makes an appearance in this one as well, although now he's much older, and now he's piloting the Vic Viper, which Konami fans will know is the ship from the classic Gradius and Life Force series of shooters for the NES and the arcades. What makes Zone of the Enders, the second runner, such a great game is really just the gameplay. It's so fun and easy to use that it will be basically the main draw, the main thing that keeps you coming back even after you beat the game, even after you've explored some of the secondary features. One of the cool things about it is that it's deceptively sort of deep. Jehuti has sort of these basic attacks that he can use his energy weapon, he can use these energy missiles, as well as a charge-up projectile that he can use. As you dive deeper into the battle system, you find that there's a lot of different things you can do. For example, with the energy sword, depending on what button you press last at the end of the combination, you can either knock an enemy back, you can knock them up, or knock them down. This becomes incredibly useful because you can actually take off additional damage or inflict additional damage on an enemy by knocking them into a wall. The enemies in the game are pretty smart. Eventually they'll get to a point where you won't be able to use these basic attacks all that often, but you can still use the basic attacks to set up some of the more complicated things. For example, you can use Jehuti's energy missiles to hit an enemy that will put up their shield, and while they're putting up their shield, they're basically leaving themselves open because they can't move. So Jehuti can run up to them and grab them, use them as a weapon, swing them around, or just start spinning and throw them into a wall and essentially do a lot of damage to them. Like the first game, there are also sub-weapons in the second runner, although the secondary weapons or the sub-weapons are much more useful in this game, and the game actually almost forces you to use them. You have a variety of different things you can use. There's homing missiles that can take out enemies in a single shot. There's a sub-weapon that can stun enemies. There's a sub-weapon that basically gives Jehuti a machine gun. All these are like really useful throughout the game. Some situations will call for specific sub-weapons, but you're not really forced to use that one. You can still kind of decide what you want to use. Also, there are some cases where Jehudi's weapons really can't do anything. In such cases, you have to look to the environment in order to defeat that particular enemy. For example, sometimes you'll have to grab some metal plating off the wall and shield yourself or use it as a barrier. Other times you'll have to, grab one of these gigantic metal pylons from some of the surrounding debris and swing it at enemies. There's just a lot of different stuff you can do, and it's really a lot of fun to play and kind of experiment with different things. If the game has any single major problem, it's probably a combination of the camera and the targeting system. Occasionally, the game is very fast-paced, so the camera does a pretty good job of keeping up with the action. But sometimes in indoor areas, it doesn't do quite as good a job as it does in outdoor areas, and you end up having the camera sort of switched around on you, and you have to move in a different direction from what you were originally moving in. Sometimes targeting can depend on your line of sight and not necessarily the enemy that's closest to you. So, for example, on one mission, you have to target this ship's engines, but when you go to the back of the ship to target the engines, it will accidentally target the ship that's behind it instead of the engine. So you have to sort of maneuver Jehudi around, get him to turn around or move back a little bit so that he'll start to target the engines. This happens at sporadic points throughout the game. It's not a huge problem, but it's something that's there and you have to fight against it occasionally. Zone of the Enders, the second runner, also has received a major upgrade in terms of visuals. The development team at Konami Computer Entertainment Japan has used this semi-cell shading technique. It's not something to the extent of a Jet Set Radio Future or Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, but it's still sort of this noticeable effect that gives everything a much cleaner but vibrant look. It's really noticeable in the orbital frame models, especially on Jehudi and on Anubis and some of the other orbital frames. Even in the environments, you can just see this just really clean, solid look. And it complements just the overall theme of the game really well. Since it's inspired by anime, it has this sort of anime look. In addition, some of the particle effects are really amazing, particularly like some of the smoke effects, the weather effects, or the smoke that comes off of certain ships. It's just really amazing to look at and to see sort of the blending of traditional visual techniques with cell shading. The fact that the enemies in the game are of relatively low detail means that they could squeeze a lot of them on screen at once. I mean, you'll literally be fighting dozens of enemies at once. Unfortunately, sometimes they seem to have gotten a little overzealous with this, so much to the point that the game tends to slow down quite a bit, particularly during one of the final battles. There's lots of enemies on screen. I mean, literally your radar is just filled with red dots. But the game just really starts to slow down a little bit. It doesn't make it like unplayable or anything like that, but it's just one of those things that it sort of hurts the overall feel of the game. It's supposed to be, fast-paced action, and to have slowdown in it sort of just hurts it a little bit. Soundtrack in the game was actually quite good. There's a main theme that's sort of inspired by J-pop, and you get remixes of that throughout the game, different sort of tones of it to match sort of what's going on screen. There's also some really sort of cool classically influenced music in the game towards the end. You get sort of the chant thing going. It's just a really surprising soundtrack, and it's surprising how well it fits the game and actually how diverse it is. If you bought the original Zone of the Enders and you played it and not just the MGS2 demo, and you were disappointed by it, don't let that deter you from picking up the second runner. It's so much vastly improved over the original game, both in regards to the story and to the gameplay. Even the graphics have received, the upgrade. So if you're looking for just a really intense action game, definitely pick up Zone of the Enders, the second runner.
It is Anubis. You must, even if I don't make it. Listen, please, be sure to stop Auman.